The quiet of the early morning in my cabin was broken by the sound of the old heater turning on. Like an elderly man clearing his throat after too many winters, it rattled as it usually did. Steam rose from the black coffee in my ceramic mug as I encircled it with my hands. I had been using the same cup for 15 years. Beige with a hairline crack running from top to bottom, resembling a scar and a faint blue line around the rim. Snow had begun to fall outside once more. Before the trees vanished into a wall of white, it was light, then heavier. I wasn't really listening to the NPR piece about farming subsidies in the Midwest that was playing gently in the background. All I needed was some noise, just enough to give the impression that the world was still turning, but not too much. In a cabin outside of Telluride, Colorado, I live alone. There are no wine tastings or chalet fireplaces here, so it's not the ski resort postcard version, only the woods. A dog named Henry moans like an old truck when he stretches, and there are pines and creaking rafters. To answer any questions, I didn't always live this way. In a glass-walled office downtown, I used to compete for whiteboard space while wearing pencil skirts. Vice President of Strategy, tall building custom keyboard tray. 2 phones, just 1 nameplate. Waverly Clare. I was that person, or the version of myself they liked anyway. The me that never refused. The me who stayed late on Thursdays and brought donuts on Mondays, who missed her own birthday but remembered everyone else's, who faced the brunt of criticism when the statistics faltered and evaded praise when they rose. I could prepare the pitch deck, present it to the board, and work out a deal with the interns in the same afternoon, so people claimed I had range. As if it were a compliment, they said it. In retrospect, though, I believe it simply indicated that I was easily taken advantage of Marshall. My supervisor proudly referred to me as the fixer. As if he had created the term, I traveled out the following day, closed the Salida account in a single supper, and then flew back the following morning, still wearing the same blue dress mascara smudged under my eyes after we lost it because he irritated their CFO. He referred to it as grit. It was what I referred to as disposable with extra stages. But at the time, I didn't notice that I thought I was climbing back then. Until I wasn't. It's funny how people refer to you as family when you're valuable. However, when you're at your most vulnerable, everything becomes nothing personal, just business. A Tuesday as dull and bland as any other was the start of the end. I recall hearing my name while waiting by the workplace printer after spilling coffee on a quarterly report and having to reprint it. Someone said, "Claire is solid." "Yes," said another voice. "But let's face it, she lacks a vision. She is in maintenance mode. She is dependable, not irreplaceable." The illusion vanished in an instant, similar to my coffee cup. 1 month later, Marshall introduced Ava, who was younger, a gloss with an MBA that was still ink fresh. She would complement my skill set, I was informed. They intended to say that she would swap it out. She now attended meetings that I used to attend. When I finally asked Marshall if I should be concerned, he laughed and replied, "Claire, don't be sensitive. Clients that I had fostered were transferred to fresh voices. You have always been here, you are kin." I grinned and I detested myself for it for the first time. Because despite his pretense of patting my back, I felt deep down that he was undermining my position, and I gave him permission, because my currency had always been, not a problem. My part, be helpful, be amiable, be less. I fulfilled that duty with my family as well as at work. Every Sunday I drove for 2 hours to help Mom around the house after she fell. I cooked up a story about a bonus and wired the money when my brother Paul forgot his house payment once more. I was the daughter of the duct tape, the utility VP. After everyone else, the sentimental janitor cleaned up. Nobody inquired about my well-being. Nobody realized that I had shattered a tooth due to excessive teeth grinding while I slept. Since cortisol had taken the place of hunger, no one seemed to care that I had begun missing meals. However, I didn't grumble, since being a burden is what complaining entails, and burdens are dropped. So I kept it all to myself, until I didn't one day. Like most revolutions, it began modestly. Ava walked in and said, "Oh, Claire, did you forward me the Q4 projections?" As I was in the break room staring at the vending machine and trying to decide between regret and disappointment, chips or cookies. She spoke as if I were her employee. And now, perhaps I did. My mouth opened to answer, then came to a standstill. I nearly missed it when something inside of me snapped so lightly. Rather, I replied, "No, I didn't." Her smile wavered. "Oh, are you able to?" Slowly, I shook my head. "I believe you'll be all right." After that, I left as simple as that. No fireworks, don't yell. Just enough, I wrote a list that evening while seated at my kitchen table with a pen and a yellow legal pad. I no longer owe the following justifications for my limits: emotional child care, corporate martyrdom, forgiveness without making amends, visits on Sundays out of guilt silence for one's own protection. What would it look like to start over, not with fire, but with peace? I wrote at the bottom, I drove into the Highlands the following day, using 3 of my 5 vacation days that were left: Henry the Fur and the squeaky buzz of an antiquated AM radio. By chance, I came to this hut, declared a fixer-upper. Not even a roof, no heat, no plumbing. However, it felt sincere, as if it didn't act prettier than it actually was. After 2 weeks, I purchased it. I kept it a secret. I learned how to cut wood, fix pipes, and insulate floors during my 6 months of commuting 3 days in the city and 4 up here. Naturally, I took the mug with me. It served as a reminder each morning of what it means to be functional despite having harm. Maintain your warmth. I had already turned down Marshall's offer of a consulting position to phase me out discreetly. Additionally, I was already learning how to be someone new when my family called to inquire as to why I had skipped yet another birthday meal. Not a repairman, not a buffer, not some smiling ghost, only Claire. And I had only just begun. I was just filling Henry's bowl with oats when I got the call. He yawned and thumped his tail against the ground as though he too dreaded the sound that broke the morning silence. Paul was the one I didn't respond. Let it ring. The screen went dark and then instantly came back to life. The same name I picked up this time, I have no idea why. Perhaps because some habits like frostbite were still in place and snow was beginning to fall again. "Claire," he murmured, panting as if he had just climbed a set of steps. "Grateful to God I am in need of you." "You do, of course," I answered slowly. "Hello, Paul." Already sensing that familiar tightness return to my chest like a vest. I neglected to request, "It's Mom." He declared she fell once more. "This time it's her hip. St. Luke's is where she is." I remained motionless. It took more than 3 hours to get to St. Luke's. 8 years had passed since my last visit to their waiting area, when I was the only one to bring Mom new clothing and spend the night on a plastic chair when she contracted pneumonia. I recalled her expression at the time, which was one of relief but never appreciation, as though I was merely carrying out my duties. "How awful," I inquired. "Shattered. She will be held overnight. Perhaps more time." Before I could stop it, I sensed my body going into logistical mode. "Who is now with her?" After saying I was... Paul let out a sigh. "However, I have a meeting large customer. I'm also not very good with hospitals. You know, she kept requesting you." She did, of course. I ought to have declined. I should have reminded him that I was no longer on-call family. However, there was something in his voice that kept me on the line. Whether it was the guilt or simply old-fashioned manipulation, I said, "I'll go." Already relieved, he exhaled. "You're a lifesaver. Ma, could you bring her favorite lavender lotion? Her heating pad, perhaps, and... Paul, I'm not Santa Claus." "All right, I apologize." Before he could continue, I hung up. I informed Henry that I would return tomorrow after packing my luggage and grabbing my coat. As if he didn't believe it, he blinked at me. I didn't either. Black ice made the drive into town treacherous. I didn't turn up the radio. Even though it was just the middle of November, Christmas tunes were beginning to appear. I swung the dial till the weather report appeared. A cold front from the Rockies is approaching, more snow. Fantastic. Nothing had changed at St. Luke's. The fragrance of bleach and melancholy persisted. I was given a visitor badge by the receptionist, who also directed me to room 318. Mom appeared smaller than I remembered when I entered the room. Her face was pallid against the hospital bedding, and her silver hair was disheveled. "Claire," she began, sounding simultaneously like a question and a sigh. "Hello, Mom." She didn't inquire how I was doing. "They gave me pudding, but it's warm." I said I took out the lotion and set the bag next to her bed. I said lavender. "As you like." Her face softened for a moment. She said, "You never forget the little things." I didn't respond, simply took a seat. I assisted her in eating for the next 2 hours, buzzed the nurse when she required pain medication, and listened to her gripe about the hospital cuisine and the loud nighttime barking of the neighbor's dog. Nothing seems to have changed, as though the Claire who abandoned her 2 years ago had never been gone, right up till she said it. My dear, I don't understand why you quit the firm. You were in such a favorable situation. Individuals like us don't simply quit jobs like that. I gazed at her. People who like us. She let out a sigh. I simply meant that we don't have dreams. We take action, Claire. You always knew where you belonged. That's what made you trustworthy. Once more, there it was, that term dependable, similar to a lawnmower. I got up, went to the window, and looked out at the snow. Now thick, swirling 1 inch at a time, erasing the planet. Mom, I was not happy. She blinked as if she had never thought of that. She remarked, but you were good at it. I was skilled at acting quiet. She said, you're always so dramatic. No. I replied as I turned around. I just finished living a reasonable life according to someone else's definition. She didn't respond. I slept on the recliner next to her bed that night, in the same manner that I used to, even though she didn't want me to. I would hold her hand in the dark when she had headaches when I was younger. I pushed her down to radiology in the morning, after assisting her in getting into the wheelchair. After thanking me, the nurse inquired as to if I was her daughter. My mother said, she's my oldest. The person who always looks after things. I took a bite out of my cheek. That wasn't what I wanted to leave behind. Paul arrived after we returned to the room. Coffee in hand, suit, and Bluetooth in place. He sank into the chair I had just left and remarked, you're a saint. I'm not, I answered. I'm worn out. It was the first time he glanced at me, glanced closely. He declared, you've changed. Indeed, I have. After that, he was at a loss for words. Shortly after noon, I departed from the hospital. The snow had ceased. The sun shone brutal and bright, with the exception of the heater rattling and the occasional pop of ice splitting beneath the tires. The drive back was calm. I made tea instead of coffee when I got back to the cottage. A herbal remedy, avoid caffeine, no advantage. Once more I gazed at the mug. The crack appeared larger than before, or perhaps I simply have a new perspective on it. For the first time in months, I wrote in my journal that evening, admission, November 14th. I once mistakenly believed that being needed equated to being loved. I once believed that I was deserving of everyone else's suffering. However, what if this is the most drastic thing I can do right now? Is it nothing? Not a repair, not taken in? Not provide an explanation? Simply be. Without me, the world wouldn't fall apart. Perhaps I don't have to keep it up any longer. A parcel arrived 3 days after the hospital stay. No address for return. No sender. It was only my name in my grandmother's handwriting, which I hadn't seen in years. It was an Oregon postmark. She used to spend summers in a little coastal village before her knees failed, and she resorted to crosswords and the couch. I cut the top with a butter knife, my hands shaking. An ancient wooden box is inside. It was carved weighty and had a subtle cedar and aged scent. Perhaps memory, I set it down beside the broken mug on the table and took it out. At first the contents were odd. One of those bluebird-shaped brooches. Yellow yarn is used to knot a bundle of dried lavender, and beneath everything, a letter addressed to me. Claire. I took a slow seat. Billie Holiday began to play on the corner radio station. I'll be seeing you. The playlist seemed to have been chosen by a ghost. I spread the letter out. Claire, my darling, I'm gone, or at least far enough from this life for you to finally calm down and open old stuff, assuming you're reading this. You are someone I know. You're not a passive person. Never did. Even when you attempted to construct a zip line from my porch to the pine tree when you were 6 years old, you always wanted to use your willpower to hold things together, improve them, and fix them. And I'm afraid you discovered it by closely observing me, my love. Not all the time, was I correct? Not with your mother in particular. When she stumbled, I blamed her because I allowed her to carry too much. I worry that you're carrying things that aren't yours. I had to share something with you. I didn't know how to say anything. I should have stated, face to face. Your grades didn't lead your father to depart or your disposition, or because, as your mother put it, you were too much. He couldn't handle seeing someone else shine, so he left. In our home, you were the most intelligent person. You were always. Additionally, some people like Claire find it unbearable to be in a room with their own dimness. He felt small in your light. You were never at fault for that. I want you to keep this in mind. It wasn't difficult to love you. He didn't know how to give it. Don't get smaller. Give up elaborating. Even if no one applauds, live the life that fulfills you. You have no idea how much I adore you. Mom, it wasn't until Henry pressed his nose into my lap that I realized I was crying. I put the letter in the box, gently folded it back, and sat there. Not moving, not giving it any thought, simply unraveling. I got out my old notebooks and built a fire that night, many pages of guilt. Things to improve lists, reminders such as be helpful, don't cry at work, and don't take up too much space. Her words overlapped like a second voice as I read them. It wasn't difficult to love you. How long had I thought I was? How many times had I thought that being silent meant being strong? Ava was on my mind, of Marshall, of Paul, of Mom. Everyone who complimented me on my agreeableness for taking it in without resisting, for keeping the peace by somewhat dimming myself. And a girl I once mentored came to mind. Lily was her name. 22. Glass sharp, I once responded with, Claire, is it normal to feel invisible when you're doing everything right? It will pass, I assured her. However, I now believe that to be untrue, I now believe that invisibility is something we choose to be when we feel unworthy of being seen rather than something that just happens to us. I ignited the bundle of lavender. Like something hallowed and old, the aroma blossomed into the space I was holding. The bluebird, the brooch Grandma used to say, freedom doesn't look like wings, it looks like choosing. I recalled that I didn't get any sleep that evening. Rather, I went through my cabin in silence barefoot and touched the items I had selected. I purchased the rough quilt at the farmer's market, the bookshelf I was at last perusing. I learned how to utilize the tools in the shed myself. I didn't get this life from anyone, from splinters and quiet. I fashioned it, clawed it, and created it. Perhaps it was also time to cease keeping it a secret. Perhaps the time had come to finally cease performing, not to prove anything. Outside, the trees creaked like old bones as a gentle wind blew through them. Once more the heater hummed with a little sigh. Henry moved beside the fire. The cracked mug on the table caught my attention, and I didn't see any flaws for the first time. A reminder caught my eye. Even if something breaks, it can still retain heat. It wasn't something I planned. That morning I didn't wake up thinking, this is the day I enter the lion's den and grin at the teeth. However, I knew as soon as I got the email with the subject line, Alumni Panel Invitation, Elevate Women in Strategy. It was being held at the firm, my former company, Marshall's home, the playground of Ava. It seems that they were showcasing women who had pursued non-traditional career paths. Somebody on the organizing committee apparently still remembered me. I gazed at the display. After that, I clicked, yes, and I'll be there without hesitation. Henry gave me a look that suggested I was insane. Perhaps I had, or perhaps I had finally located it for once. It seemed strange to drive into the metropolis, too much glass, too many advertisements. The number of persons wearing urgent perfume is excessive. I had on a crisp blue sweater and trousers. No name tag, no PowerPoint. Only the bluebird brooch, which was subtly put over my heart. I was 5 minutes ahead of schedule. Like a visitor to a home I had assisted in building security, buzzed me in. The conference space had expanded walls made of glass, exposed brick. Edison bulbs are attempting to be daring. I watched from the corner as the other speakers came in. Some holding tablets like shields, some wearing expensive clothes. Some of them I knew grinned courteously. I was then greeted by the moderator, a woman I faintly recalled from HR, Claire. Whoa, I haven't seen you in a long time. You appear strange. I truly meant it when I said I feel different. It started. The women stood one by one and shared their stories of pivots, burnouts, startups, and lateral shifts. Then Ava arrived, still shiny sharp as ever. We talk a lot about leaning in, she remarked, grinning at the audience. However, there are instances when success involves letting go of roles, titles, and other people's perceptions of your ideal self. A wave of nods passed. I'll acknowledge her. She had matured. It was then my time. No microphone, only my voice. I used to believe that if you were good at something, you had a duty to continue doing it. I started, even if it caused you pain, even if you were rendered invisible, particularly if it brought consolation to others. There was stillness in the room. I once thought that being required was equivalent to being valued, that being quiet, saying yes, and staying late were what made me deserving. I took a moment to allow their eyes to adjust to reality. But now I am aware that there is no reward for peace. It's a right. And sometimes quitting performance is the bravest thing you can do. Yes, I brought the cracked cup, which I held up. This was my grandmother's property. It has chips in it. There is some leakage. However, it retains its warmth similar to me, like many of you. The tension was broken by a quiet laugh, then silent nods. A woman I didn't know came up to me after the session, younger, anxious. She reminded me a bit of the girl I used to mentor, Lily. Her voice wavered as she said, "Your story." It helped me understand that I'm not broken, simply slanting in the incorrect way. I gave her hand a squeeze. I informed her, "No one discusses the cost of survival. However, you owe no one your downfall." After that, I departed. I didn't need to be there. Not because I wasn't welcome. I received a call from Marshall later that week. I nearly didn't answer. However, I felt compelled to respond to it, not for him, but for closure. "Claire," he said, "heard you were inside the structure. Word is you had a big influence." I remained silent. He cleared his throat. "We're growing. In search of someone to consult regarding strategy, high-level information, adaptable, good money." Gazing at the roaring fire in my fireplace, I grinned. No, I'm not accessible. Startled. He laughed. "Well, give it some thought." "Yes, I have for many years." Marshall, goodbye. Click. All I could feel was lightness. After years of fog, it feels like air in my lungs. I took a car to a tiny neighborhood art fair that weekend, something that would have delighted Grandma. As I made my way between booths, I came across an artwork. In the midst of a snowy woodland, a woman stands by herself. No way, no map. Her hands, however, were hot and ember-like, and there was a lone bluebird sitting on a branch next to her. Without hesitation, I purchased it. I put it over my fireplace that evening. After that, I filled the cracked cup with tea, turned on the heater, and watched as the steam curled like a ribbon of truth into the room around me. I wasn't who they believed me to be. I was never lost, though, simply becoming in the mountains. Spring arrives gradually. It doesn't blow up. It percolates, a trickle from above, a gentleness in the breeze. The way the earth forgot how to be seen when the snow recedes like a wave. When I heard tires on gravel, I was still drinking tea from the same old mug that had been permanently discolored by time and chamomile uncommon. Up here, unexpected guests are a fiction. The automobile door had just closed when I stepped out onto the porch. There she was, Lily. I coached the intern almost 10 years ago. The person who, while doing everything well, once asked me what it meant to feel invisible. She now had an older appearance, in a witnessed way, not a weary one. A paper bag that had been delicately folded at the top was in her hands. "I was close by," she said uneasily. "I was reluctant to text. I simply had to see you." Grinning, I pushed open the screen door. "Enter now." We took a seat by the fire. Immediately, as though they recalled one another, Henry snuggled up at her feet. After quitting the tech industry 2 years ago, she told me about her new career in nonprofit consulting, about poetry, slams therapy, and panic episodes. I listened quietly and with a glad heart. After then, she took a gift out of the bag. As she opened it, she remarked, "It's silly. However, I thought of you when I came across this at a Santa Fe flea market. It was a mug ceramic blue one. Side has a tiny crack running down it. The handle had a bird in flight form. I am aware that you already possess one," she uttered rapidly. "However, this is a new version, still not perfect but selected." It was in both of my hands. "It was appropriately weighty," I said in a whisper. Thank you. It's flawless. For a long period, we sat in silence. The flames gave a hiss, the window panes were pushed by the wind. Then Lily asked, "Do you regret leaving it all behind?" I didn't respond right away. Rather, I went to the bookcase and took down the ancient wooden box that Grandma had left me. I gave the letter to Lily after opening it. Silently, she read. When she was done, her throat worked. She remarked, "I've never heard anyone say it like that. He wasn't prepared to show you love. Therefore, you weren't difficult to adore. When I was 16, I felt like I needed to hear that I gave a nod. I believe that the majority of us needed to hear it before we did." After she departed that evening, I went outside with the new mug and stood on the porch barefoot. The trees had begun to sing once more with tiny green buds, humming low notes of regeneration, even if snow was still clinging to the yard's margins. A bluebird perched on the limb of the oldest pine in the distance, right outside the gate. It cocked its head, observed me. In a sort of silent toast, I lifted the mug, not to win, not to be successful, but to go back to be present to being someone who knows she is sufficient without the need for praise. I said in a whisper, "I see you." Perhaps just possibly, I was referring to myself. I received a letter in the mail later that week from Mom, written by hand Claire. The painting you gave me years ago, which I claimed was too abstract, was discovered. In the kitchen, I hung it. I guess I'm beginning to get it. Now, I was never able to see what you did. I apologize for the delay in expressing my pride in you. You are not required to return. But if you ever do, I'd really like to know how you prepare tea quietly. Love, Mom. I refrained from crying. I simply put the letter in the wooden box while grinning next to the lavender next to the brooch. After that, I walked outside and sat by the little stone fountain that I had fixed myself. I listened to the water gurgle and the birds sing one note at a time as if someone were humming the tune of a life that had been rebuilt. Not for show, not for pardon, but for liberty.